So you're not. It's the cloud. Okay, great. So I'm going to turn my laptop off because I'm having feedback.
Roland and Anna, you're the only two folks I had never met before. Good to see you, Redelia. Again, and Shawnee, good to not see you, but know you're there.
Hello, everybody that just joined. I'm Roland.
Okay, guys, I think we can start here. And again, thank you guys for being prompt. We're here in the offices of Dean and Dr. Julianne Malveaux's office. I wanted to share some content with her, but I'm going to have that as a leave behind. What I want to do is discuss that we are here as a group formatted to make sure that all the content that we own, we articulate, and we represent can be synthesized to fit the format for one, ethnic studies that could become part of a pilot project and be brought into the framework for California institutions, K through 12, community colleges, and four-year universities. And the content that we have are formation of things that represent a timeline of African-American military history, but also synthesizes Native American, Hispanic, and Asian Pacific Islander history in this timeline. And so my goal is to make sure that we're able to make this content available for Dr. Malveaux's team to qualify as something that they could actually use moving forward and making a pilot for California framework. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Malveaux. There are at least 3 people on the call who have not met her yet. And she is a force to help make sure that everything that we're doing is matching all of the initiatives and all the things that we can do to qualify for ethnic studies in the state of California. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Julianne Malveaux.
Well, greetings all. I don't know if y'all can see me. Karen, I think you need to do something with your
No, we
camera.
have to move the camera. Yes,
Okay, yeah, so it's camera up here. Let me see if we can.
Let's see here. Okay, at least you can see a piece of my head. Anyway, first of all, okay, good. Welcome to the College of Ethnic Studies here at Cal State LA. We are one of only 2 colleges of ethnic studies in the country. I have 3 departments reporting to me, Pan-African Studies, Asian American Studies, and Chicano Latino Studies. We are also charged with building a Department of American Indian Studies, which I'm really excited about. In fact, you all might be able to help me. Our provost has given me a tenured position in American Indian Studies. So if you all have people who might apply for such position, I would be more than happy to entertain their application. No promises, but I work for Cal State LA where we have more rules than the law allows. My previous academic appointment was as a president of a small historically Black women's college, Bennett College, where I got to do whatever what I wanted to. That's not the case at Cal State LA. Even if I was the president, I couldn't do what I wanted to do. There's so many rules. But anyway, so I have no promises, but I am actively recruiting for that position. I'm also, for the record, actively recruiting an economist to serve in our Pan-African Studies department. That's also a tenured position. I'll be bringing 7 new people into our department. We're also looking for a tenured position in Asian American Studies, because the brother who's leading that department now is trying to write his book. He's over 70, age discriminating. He told me that. He said, I just want to write my book. So I'm like, dude, go with God. But before you go, make sure I got somebody in here to replace you. We have 2 wonderful junior Asian American Studies faculty, wonderful, but they're junior, so they can't share a department. So anyway, so what do I do and how do I do it? First of all, I would invite y'all to Google me. Half of this stuff is true, some of it is not. It's Julianne Malveaux. Just Google me. I have been a provocateur ever since I can hold a pen. I wrote my first article when I was 13. The Black Scholar actually published a piece I wrote when I was 18, and it's really funny because this is pre-internet, pre-everything. My grandmother had to drive me across the bay. I'm a native San Franciscan, and to drive me across the bridge, turn my copy into the Black Scholar. And so they paid me like $10, and she took it out of my hand and said, "This is your gas, this is for your gas," because she had to drive me twice across the bridge. But anyway, ethnic studies is about myth busting. It's about taking the myths about our people and shattering them. It's about claiming our space in history. When I was at Bennett, my line was to the young ladies, history belongs to she who holds the pen. In other words, if we don't write the history, it won't be told. As the African proverb says, when the lion learns to write, the hunter is no longer the hero. And that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've been here for 6 months. Kevin and I met at City Club or something like that. Yeah, at the City Club, just casually, and he shared a bunch of stuff. And I'm excited about some of the work he's done. I've shared it with a couple of colleagues and friends, especially about the military history. I don't know that you and I wrote a book years ago called The Paradox of Loyalty, an African-American response to the war on terrorism. It was an edited volume that has a beautiful picture of a native / black looking brother on the cover. And one of the contributors is one of my dearest friends. In fact, the sister I was sharing with you just lost her brother-in-law in a fire. But anyway, long story short, she got so excited when I told her that we were talking about some collaboration. So then we have it. I don't know what else I can tell you. I'm an economist by training. I am a shit disturber by inclination. I want to shatter every myth about our people, and I am excited about that. I've got a great team here at the College of Ethnic Studies, and we're building that. We're going to increase our faculty representation by about 30% by bringing in 7 new faculty people in the fall. We can fill the positions. Now I invite all of you to go to the Cal State website and look at what we have there. What else can I tell you? You know what? I will tell you nothing else. Ask me questions.
Okay, well, great. I'm going to make a few introductions since we have about 45 minutes here. I'm going to start left to right with retired Brigadier General Arnold Gordon Bray. Can you please introduce yourself? And let's keep it to 60 seconds if we can.
Well, having said that, I'm General Retired Gordon Bray. I was an airborne Ranger infantryman for 35 years military service. I am a native South Carolinian, currently living in North Carolina, approximately 78 miles from Bennett College. And I have traveled to 47 states and 57 countries plus. And I say traveled, spent time in. And I try to bring my whole cloth to every conversation, and my own personal evolution as a human being to understanding what is now becoming, I call the U3D, underserved, undervalued, underrepresented, and disenfranchised. That's me.
Thank you, General Bray. Okay, next we have Ted Lai. Can you mute?
Yeah, absolutely. Ted Lai, Vice President of Student Services and Success at Calbright College, online community college that's competency-based and flexibly paced, trying to make sure that we provide equity for adult learners.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ted. Lamar Walker.
Hi, Lemire. I am a designer by trade, but I've been working in the digital product and startup ecosystem for the last decade plus. I'm currently focused on building out a new platform called Origin, which is a platform for taking the physical and the natively digital into the metaverse. And so we're working across a few territories, Switzerland, here in the US, and we'll be launching in April. And Kevin's brought me in around the context of being able to capture the preciousness of many of the holdings that I'm guessing you all have, and bringing it in and making it accessible in ways that folks like the people that are in Ted's programs would enjoy.
Great, thank you, Laverne. All right, Anne Marie, Persimone. Uh-oh, you have to unmute, Anna Marie.
My lips are moving.
Anna Marie, you have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. I thought we skipped over Roland, but,
Oh, well, I didn't see Roland on the screen.
okay,
Yeah.
he was there. Anyway,
Oh, sorry, okay, my bad.
No,
Wait,
go,
look
go,
up
go,
here.
Roland.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
Anna Marie, Roland will go after you.
Okay, so I am at Cal State University, Northridge. And I'm teaching a course called New Directions in Digital Media, which is a big fat kitchen sink survey course that covers everything from the history of computing, the internet, copyright law, and then all the new wonderful realities, VR, AR, XR, whatever. I actually, my first teaching, well, no, it was second. I taught at Atlanta College of Art, which is now part of Savannah, SCAD. And then I moved here from there and I got hired to teach a course in video art history and criticism at Cal State LA. So I had to throw that one out there. Since then, I've worked in cable, broadcast television, public television, e-entertainment, ABC, places like that. And then I went to AFI for about 10 years and developed everything from their digital content lab, enhanced TV workshops, and then a lot of interactive media, basically, and a K through 12 screen education program. Left there, freelanced around for a bunch, still do, and I've been at Cal State Northridge for about 7 years now, and I absolutely love it. I have a very diverse group of students. It's a big part of my curriculum. I care a lot about it. I was introduced really to value people of color by working with Dolly McLean and Jackie McLean and the Artist Collective in Hartford, Connecticut, when I first popped out of art school. So my background's art. I went into media, administration, a little bit of everything. I was cut my teeth on the independent film and video movement. So that's it.
Roland Waddell.
Hello, everyone. I'm a managing partner of Onyx Communications in Leesburg, Virginia, suburbs of DC. I'm a North Carolina native, UNC Chapel Hill grad. We are a marketing communications, visual information technology firm.
Thank you, Roland. Okay, Cordelia Shaw, Professor Shaw.
Hi, how are you? How's everyone? I'm Cordelia. I teach at Santa Monica College. I'm faculty lead for the media production program, our promo pathways program, and our newly developing esports program.
Wow, that's great.
Great. Okay, and Shoni, are you available?
I'm available. I'm here.
Okay. All right, well, introduce yourself. There's some people who haven't met you yet, sir.
All right. Hello, beautiful people I have not met yet. My name is Shoni Doe. Started here as a student advocate, student voice, when I was in Santa Monica College, after getting some experience in, designing different programs that impact the future educational programs across LA County through working with the Department of, LA County for Arts and Culture as a youth advisor. I then went off to create my own nonprofit, which works with students at Santa Monica and works with various different clubs there, around 45 different clubs. And we help to organize them and give them internal structure, support, templates to help with their marketing and with their project management. So I help with designing different programs and pipelines through helping students. I assist Kevin Clark in doing that. And on top of that, I am also a video editor by trade. That's what I do. I'm also an artist. I'm jumping into the NFT space. I'm very excited to be a part of this project and see what I can contribute to making this happen and getting it out to students in a way that is not just impactful, but allows them to understand the importance of what it is that they're learning, what it is that they're getting, and what it is that they're doing. So that way they're not confused as to why they're being taught this. So thank you for having me.
Great. And we're missing one part of the team. Our contributor for a lot of the artifacts in history, Mr. Powell, he can't seem to get into the phone call. So as I introduce, Ted Lai has to leave the meeting. I want to be able to give Ted a chance to talk about his interest in Asian American studies. And his context for me is that he comes from And he gave me a large part of the advocacy of making sure that students and student voice and agency gave me an opportunity to bring people like Shoni, meet people like Professor Shaw, who needed to learn how to code and create. And I'm going to be bringing a lot of students into this process. If we get a green light from our partners to make sure that this material becomes something that you guys think can be published, a large part of this work will be done by students. Some from community colleges, some from state universities, and even some who have graduated, who are looking for work. And that's what my advocacy is, to make sure that all the things that we get done for students are done by students.
Great. I'm
Okay.
looking forward.
Okay, so Ted, are you, Ted Lee? I guess
Yep.
Ted, oh,
Yeah, I don't want to dominate. I just want to say that I'm really excited. What you mentioned at the beginning, Dr. Malveaux, really resonated with me because at my time at Apple, at my time here at Calbright as well, I've been on DEI task forces or within the DEI leadership realm. So it's something that's extremely important to me. I actually do a podcast with my younger daughter. By younger, she's 21 now, but we do a podcast called the Asian American History 101 podcast, where we really focus on Asian Pacific American history, but especially within the intersectionality of a variety of groups that are a little bit more invisible, right, within our country. So the idea of ethnic studies resonates with me wherever I am in whatever role. So whatever I can do to help promote, to help create content, I'm happy to do it. I think that the key for me is always how might we get our students who are in these programs for ethnic studies to express their knowledge and make those connections through creativity.
I'm gonna get your information from Kevin. Look forward to talking to you. I think there are two young women who are just amazing in Asian American studies. They're both junior professors, but I think that they would probably want to hear your podcast and perhaps share it with some of their students. Yeah, so we need to talk.
Great.
great, and that's it's absolutely important. And this is, for me, an open source way of making sure that Dr. Malveaux understands that everybody here is a volunteer. No one here is paid. Everybody's basically mentoring me and helping to make sure that all this stuff that we can present to you is represented. So we have, community college, four-year university, we have students, and we have different ethnic groups that are not represented here. But again, Chicano Latino studies, Native American, we do not have a representative that will necessarily be a subject matter expert. But that's something that we're very interested in with the Buffalo Soldier history, to make sure that that timeline that meets with the Indian Wars connects with people who can speak about the cross connectivity between Native Americans and African Americans during that period of time.
Well, I have a couple of people I'll refer you to. We will be doing this summer, which I'm so excited about, American Indian Upward Bound program. We're going to be partnering with a local high school that is an American Indian high school. I cannot pronounce the name of it, but they're terrific. And so they're going to pay for 20 students. We're going to pay for 20 students. They're bringing American Indian, and I want to add indigenous students. So I have to use college funds for that, but I'm cool with it because it's a good use of money. But it's also, we got a couple of subject matter experts who might be willing to work with you. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But anyway, we're excited about that program because it just basically allows us to create a pipeline of American Indian students to the university. I mean, what we know about under enrollment is that neglected populations, I hate the term people of color, although I have to use it sometimes, but neglected populations, Black, Brown, Asian, less so Asian, but still Asian, Native American, do not have clear pathways to higher education. And that the racism that riddles our K through 12 system sidelines too many of our young people. So we're thinking that this will help us bring American Indian students, and I'm a native San Franciscan, but I lived on the East Coast for the past 30 years. Now I'm back. And So people use different language. The legislation in California is American Indian. That's the term as opposed to Native American. So the legislation that requires ethnic studies specifically says American Indian. So that's a term that I'm trying to teach myself to use.
Okay, great. So Ted, again, hang on as long as you
And
can.
thanks, Ted. I'll be in touch with you.
Yeah, so hang on as long as you can. With the time we have remaining, I really want to talk about how we can match our collective force with things that I believe we've heard from Dr. Malveaux. One of the things that we've heard from her is that there is a grant that we may be able to qualify for. And we want to know what we can do to better prepare ourselves for submitting ourselves for qualification.
That's a grant
For the K through 12 ethnic studies program.
there is I'm not sure where that money is, so I would have to go back and look at it. We do have a grant that's it's training K through 12 teachers for ethnic studies. It's kind of a murky thing, but I'm very interested in expanding curriculum. I also like the idea of a publication that might deal with the time period that you're looking at. I mean, one of the things that I proposed to the team here when I came was a new journal of ethnic studies. There are a few out there, but not many of them are as intersectional as I'd like. And the intersectionality is the issue, is that we can't just look at Black or brown or Asian or American Indian without looking at the ways our histories are intertwined. I mean, I'll tell you all a funny story. I'm the queen of funny stories. My mom was the first African-American to teach at the University of Mississippi back in the, I guess, late 70s. I was in college, and she decided she wanted to teach at Ole Miss because she's a native Mississippian. Anyway, I went to visit her one time. I can't tell you all the whole story about that. I went wearing a dashiki, and the taxi wouldn't take me because he said he wouldn't take any Africans. Anyway, that was that. So she had to send a whole other taxi. But we went into the Mississippi Delta, and she said, we're going to get the best Chinese food we've ever had. Now, we're from San Francisco. So I'm thinking, we are not going to get good Chinese food in Mississippi. Mommy, you've been drinking the Kool-Aid. These two Asian American brothers and sisters, they own this restaurant, came out, how y'all doing? With the thickest Mississippi accent you could ever have. But then when we went into the restaurant, guess what? It was some of the best Chinese food we'd ever had. It was amazing. We are connected. And there's research about Asian Americans and Black people that talk about how in Mississippi in particular, people intermarried. If they married a Black person, they were considered Black. If they married a white person, they were considered white. So their race was a function of who they married. So this kind of intersectionality is something that we really have to pay attention to. So that's one of my visions. My topic is to try to figure out a journal that deals with some of the, not just ethnic studies in silos, but the intersectional aspects of ethnic studies. Chad, I see you laughing. You've been to Mississippi.
I have actually. I have visited, and I've visited some of the stores that are still around that are run by Chinese back in the days when there were segregated grocery markets. And so they've had these stores for generations. But the Chinese there very clearly didn't care who they sold to. It was about having a business that could be sustained. And so they often had to open up markets on, two corners on a street, one that was white only and one that was,
Everybody else.
that was for anyone. But I love that type of intersectionality, because when you look at the anti-miscegenation laws back then, oftentimes you couldn't have any intermarrying with white people. So you would then have Blacks and Chinese, and then it became a gray area where the laws didn't necessarily pertain to Chinese. And so then Chinese were allowed to marry whites, but it was always kind of one of those weird things. But yeah, I love that story.
Wow. Well, so here's what I heard, the journal. And I throw this out to the group because most of our people on this call are storytellers.
Mhm.
And some of them are digital media specific storytellers. film, television, animation, immersive media. Well, my idea of coming up with something that could be part of the pilot is something that we can curate some of the stories that are intersectional about a timeline. So it's not about ethnicity or tribe, it's about the timeline. And this interactive timeline that I can imagine that connects to this journal starts to take apart the things that we believe are important to this pilot. If it's, construction, if it's Civil War, if it's Revolutionary War, if it's, World War II, these are the things that we want to know as to how we can actually start to match or cherry pick from what you guys believe is the most important era that we can then start to really focus on putting our best efforts towards. I think that could be a way for us to start filling out the rest of the timeline.
Sounds good.
So does anybody have any ideas, suggestions, or comments about what I just said?
I have a comment. I think if there's a way that we start with now and go backwards, meaning telling the stories and revealing the people that are involved that we don't know from all these intersectionality standpoints, from the perspective of, General Bray's acronym there, who are the people that are working today? Like when Kevin, you mentioned the software association and who's in it and or who's not in it and who's in these companies and can we highlight them? I'm obviously coming out of my own playbook with Valence, which is what we were trying to do, which is to surface the people that are actively creating, innovating things that are really relevant for today's audience, and then going back and further back and further back. But by making it now and relevant for a lot of the folks who need that grounding in today and honestly what's in it for them, that might be a way to get there.
That's a cool idea. I also was thinking that framing it as kind of a timeline. I'm sort of a favorite. I love timelines myself. And you can compare, you could have different levels of it. I remember once at the AFI prototyping lab, basically is what we were doing. There was a producer working on the history of Irish rock and roll. And the designers made a guitar arm with all the frets, and along each fret, the mainstream, what we know of is mostly US and UK rock and roll, was on one end of it and the Irish bands were all on the other. And I thought that's a great, if there's some kind of a visual design or conceit that could be used so that we can look at some of this history, these benchmarks. And I do think starting with the now and going back and back further is a great idea, because the younger people in particular are going to relate to that a little bit more, right? But not to say they don't love hearing that history, but it's here and there. But I could see jumping back further. For example, the issues that we're having now with algorithms that are specifically attached to skin color in a lot of ways, that, Kodak film, the same problem was happening when that was first developed. And so it'd be interesting to see some of those. Certainly I'm talking from the media perspective, but I'm sure there's a lot of other congruencies within other areas.
And I'd be particularly interested in Shoni because he is a student, of learning, as well as a representation of some of the student agency that we want to have. Shoni, can you think of what type of history makers or icons that we could focus on that could actually start us to establish some stakeholders that we can study and then work backwards as to where and how they may have gotten to where they are today? Any icons or people that you can think of that we can start focusing on?
Well, like I don't want to give like specific examples because that's just not my specialty. I mean, like, I'd say to kind of answer your question, I'd focus on people in history that would allow for students to explore history. Because what I feel like at times is when you pick only specific people because of their importance, and the impact they make versus, hey, here's all these other nuances surrounding this event. And now you can explore it, go off and explore these different nooks and crannies. It allows people to feel like they're not so much forced to learn something for the sake of a test, but it feels more along the lines that they get to organically explore the history of events that led up to what it is that we see impacting today, in terms of histories, law, war, laws that have been passed, the different civil movements that have happened. There's so much to really go through. So I think by only focusing on just the few, we kind of lose the many. So just by somewhat diversifying the amount of people we're following for a current event, we get the opportunity to how it unfolded, who are the people who were there, and allow students to explore it. I guess that's the main thing I would do is, to make it less of a, hey, memorize this stuff and take this test, so that way we can qualify you as someone who has memorized, then is now ethnic ready, ethnic studies certified. It now becomes more, hey, here's this history, and we like for you to explore it and see what it is that you find, and then let's talk about it. And here's what we found. And then it becomes a conversation. And that is more of an educational experience, in my mind, when it becomes a conversation,
Absolutely.
something that you have to memorize. So that's what I would suggest.
And I'm looking at the chat, guys. Roland, you mentioned something you want to expound? I'm going to print out the chat as well as the recording for everyone, but you want to expound on what you put there?
Yes, we are pursuing a partnership with the state of North Carolina Historical Sites, because one of my animator colleagues created a unique 360 virtual tour style for Colonial Williamsburg. So if you click on that link, you can check it out. What we did is we included live actors performing. So there's one that's pretty profound about the involvement of the enslaved at Colonial Williamsburg. And we plan to do the same thing for a little known, Dr. Malveaux, you may know about this, Charlotte Hawkins Brown site outside of Greensboro.
The architect was the same architect that did many of our buildings at Bennett. So if you go to the Charlotte Hawkins Brown site, you'll see buildings that are very reminiscent of old buildings you see at Bennett. So yeah, I'm very familiar with it. That's exciting because Charlotte Hawkins Brown was such a lady, and she is.
Yes.
She should be better now.
So we plan to do a 360 virtual tour with the Canary building, which is where she lived, as you know, and that will afford everyone who was way ahead of her time, as you know. And this, for all of you on the call that may not be familiar with Charlotte Hawkins Brown, we're talking circa 1904. She jumped off of a train, self-taught, whole 9 yards, and she created this Palmer Institute. And you had a who's who of middle class and upper class African Americans from all over the world, really all over the country anyway, that sent their kids there to be taught certain skill sets and etiquette. And so our approach to virtual tours is to bring the power of place virtually, because national parks, as you know, are struggling to stay alive, and national park rangers, don't rarely have the budget to go into the classroom, whether it's college or K through 12, and schools are not able to bring the kids to the locations. So the next best thing is virtual. So we're pretty excited about that, and we want to do much more with that down the road.
That's powerful. I do envision, and so I'm gonna, again, we've got about 20 minutes left. I'm looking at the chat. Is there a way for General Gray to chime in on what you believe the narrative should be? I've heard the myth busting. Is there anything else that we can add to the narrative for a potential journal that can be published, that curates all the things that we're trying to do?
I think there are lots of things to address. I almost used the word myriad, but it's an overused word. Dr. J, since our last encounter, I'd like to say, first of all, I represent that you are no chaser. And, you know, we addressed this question of woke, and I went back to look at something that you said that was important. You said people refuse to know history. That means it's in their face and they're seeing it. And I'm going to use the other part of what I heard from Dr. Lai, or Mr. Lai. He talked about intersectionality. I think it's more than just purpose in people. It's the myriad ideas, and it's the one from which I depart. One is that people are they are hearing and seeing words. But just as Roland indicated, one of the most powerful tools we have today is the visual. The visual has been what has created the narrative of the myths. And even if the lion can tell the story, who took the photos, painted the photos, will have the greater impact. I specifically like to look at the Boston Massacre photos of 1770, where Crispus Attucks is by definition and written word, the first American to die for freedom. The first. Sam Adams says that. And so, not Sam Adams, excuse me, President Adams says that. And people forget that. It allowed people like Colin Kaepernick to disassociate with the flag. The first stripe on the flag is basically about the blood spilled for this nation. So this is where I start my part into what Kevin is doing. Just like you are raised in San Francisco, even though you and I are about the same age, which is 39, I'm 29, I know that, but I'm just saying. The fact that the West was really, the African American of the West was different from the African American of the East and the South, in the sense that how they were evolved and came about because what the Buffalo soldiers that pushed that direction, they were absent and different of a lot of the biases, even though places like Houston and others have some other stories that we can tell. There's that crossover. See, I'm a military man, but see, I'm also a student of history. And I know that war is politics by other means. Intersectionality of understanding that there is no history without war. And so those things tie together, and the people that evolved from that are important. So the stories that we told, the stories that we tell, and how we capture them also influence how we think. Even in the military, there are many Marines running around today who think that they were byproducts of the Montfort Port Marines of the post-1947 integration. They missed that up until 1917. There were Black Marines. All of this is rooted in helping people understand that they're part of the treasure and DNA of what we call America. And with the tools that are available to you as an instructor, especially out in California, you are training young minds to go ahead and bust the myth, not just by word, but also by how we capture and tell the stories of who we are. I encourage all of you all to look at the movie Love of Liberty, introduced, because it's 10,000 hours of video and footage that are accurate, certified by the Air Force and the Army's historical departments. But it helps change the narrative for an awful lot. And without going into too much of my own story of becoming, you'll love this word, I know you hate it, but I gotta say it, woke. The teleporter.
You just have to go there.
The
You just have to go there.
the teleporter that took me from being asleep to being required to tell my story at every platform, not my story, excuse me, telling our story at every platform. You know, even part of the DNA of America is to say what Jesus Christ was white, because the Italians became prominent and they started painting themselves. The stories that we tell and the stories that we see sometimes don't match, but you know, we are still a visual people, all of us worldwide.
They weren't painting the Southern Italians, by the way.
That's right. So it becomes important, and for me, because like 14 presidents were Army generals, not other generals, Army generals, 14. And that's because part of what we learn in our travels across the nation and across the world makes us have to recognize that we have the opportunity to change. But yeah, all that said, intersectionality is the word, making sure that we are able to look at every problem for its potential reach in other issues, areas, people, and all those things. It's the reason why I came with the idea of U3D. And it was because I recognized that even though complexions are changing, community cultures really aren't. And all the minds aren't changing. You know, and that was a great story that you told from Mr. Lai about your time in Mississippi, because that wouldn't happen with us. Because the reality is that, songs in the key of life captures us perfectly. Because I got 24 grandparents, aunts, uncles, 12 of them are from a first great grandmother who was white. And that first 12 were so light, they are not associated with the other 12 from the Black grandmother. Can't even find them because they start passing. All right, I stopped there, but it opens the door for an awful lot.
Guys, in the last 10 minutes, I'm gonna leave minutes for us to have some comments, but I wanna make sure that Dr. J has the opportunity to ask any questions of us before we break contact.
Is it okay if I share one last comment on what General Bray just said? But before we move on, just a quick comment, because you probably a good point. Brought up a lot of points, but what all that I'm thinking of is, how do you translate what we're teaching in a way that isn't going to impact students, that makes them resentful, bitter, and or hateful? Because in this current environment, we're already very skewed, we're already very politically skewed, and there's just a lot of heated arguments and debate and hate within the whole sphere of it all, especially when it comes revolving around skin tones and coming around culture. It's the culture wars at this point, but everybody's calling it the white on black, black on white. It's very down the middle. So yeah, it's very polarized. So I don't know how to approach that. I just want to bring that awareness to you guys, is that if we are going to go about teaching a curriculum that's going to raise an entire generation, we want to do so in a manner that raises them to be instilled with also a code of conduct, in a way that they're not going to take this and feel and internalize it and identify that, with the anger or the resentment, and cause them to just be even more polarizing, because that's just going to make a very horrible nation that I don't want my kids growing up in at all.
If I can't, Roland has a 1969 clip of Mr. Rogers and a police chief with their feet in the water together. And I'm not going to
know that
steal
clip. I know
his
that clip.
thunder,
Yeah.
but
Great.
there,
Good one.
first of all, you got to have honest conversations. And because you're in an academic environment, academics and folks like that and life, you know, bleeding in the same foxhole, those kinds of things help change the narrative. And it takes leadership. It takes not hammering home something that you personally believe in, beating people up about it, but allowing them to know by, as Dr. J says, allowing them to know by giving them the information, because at the end of the day, it's going to be the willingness to accept it. But if you don't try to hammer it home, let them see it, let them read it, give them, especially the academic side, let them get real sources and let them see the source. You know, you folks from North Carolina, you know what kind of, I'm in the community right now that is literally right down the middle.
Yeah.
And my world, and as a former general, my world sometimes has me as the only in a room, and other times a part of the room. My voice is always heard because I choose to be a wedge, not a token. And when you're in a room, you have to be as candid, as articulate, as unmoved by other people's passion as you possibly can. So that one, you're willing to listen, and then perhaps even be as Socratic as you possibly can, not sarcastic, excuse me, as you possibly can, so that you can see where they're from. If I may, one quick story. My former commander was the 1966 graduate of the University of Alabama. That means he was a freshman when George Wallace stood on his steps, and he joined a culture that says segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And in 2003, we were just back from Iraq, smoking cigars and drinking on his back porch. And I asked him, could you have ever met, before I got the words out my mouth, he says, not in my wildest damn dreams when I graduated. But it's the kind of conversations that you have to see people that there is an evolution that can be possible. And again, tons of stories about this, because this is why I said, even I had to check myself out and say, who was I at 10 years old? And who am I now as a 29-year-old with a few more years?
I'll be very brief if I may, Kevin.
I've got 11:15.
Correct. Okay.
All right, so let's throw.
So guys, we got a few minutes left before we break contact. Dr. J has another meeting. But I did want to introduce Mr. Powell. He is now going to just share with us, and I'm going to set him up by saying that we have some activities for Black History Month that he will be part of. Speaking engagements, as well as we're participating with the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Black Patriots Project with the History Channel. And that's going to be part of the content that I want to leave behind for you, that will allow you to see some of the things that we can synthesize into a pilot. All right. So Mr. Powell, could you say hello to Dr. Julianne Malveaux?
Hello, doctor. It's a pleasure to meet you, even though it's by phone.
Well, likewise. Sorry that we can't see you, but welcome.
All right, thank you so much. I did get a chance to listen to most of the program. And you know, when it comes to ethnic studies, I guess the only thing that I can say is that we as a nation, we as a people, have been taught lies about who we are, just like so many others. I think the reality of today is the lies have to go to the side. If we as a species are going to continue to live, we have to learn a simple thing. That's living together. I think when it comes to telling the story of my grandfather, Buffalo Soldiers, or Walter Howard Loving, and those men, these are parts of our joint history. And when it comes to just studies, period, whether it's Mexico, Asia, or whatever, we as a species have this connectedness that's there. opportunity and any, part that I can help to establish this. And again, thank you so much for taking the time with everyone today.
Okay,
Well, thank
thank you,
you.
Mr. Powell. Okay, so we got 3 minutes left. I'm going to give Dr. J the floor. Anything that you want to say before we break contact? Because we got 3 minutes
No,
left.
I look
Okay.
forward to continuing to work with y'all.
Okay.
I think that Kevin, by serendipity, has brought us something that's very interesting. I'm going to ask you at some point soon to come back and present to our faculty so that they have a sense of what you're working on and how we might work together. So I'm in. Now, I'm in footnote. As Anna Marie knows, I work for Cal State LA. I say I'm in. Except I mean, I have a limited resource. I can't do nothing without somebody saying, did you ask me for permission? I believe it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes.
Yes.
So we
I
do what we
agree.
do. But
Here, slap my wrist.
I look forward to working with you guys. I've learned a lot from you all today, so I'm very grateful. This is a great opportunity. Redelia, I think your name is, the sister from Santa Monica College. I want to talk to you about getting some of your students to transfer up here to get their BAs at Cal State LA in ethnic studies. And I think there are lots of partnerships here on the table. Brother General, you crack me up. You truly do. But I look forward to working with you as well. You're in the DC area?
You're muted.
See North Carolina.
I'm in Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Yeah.
About twice a year I come out to California or Las Vegas because for whatever reason Las Vegas leadership loves me. So
I have lost wages and I discourage people's participation in that place, but we will connect sometime.
In the last 60 seconds, I brought Lemur on because he brings not only financial literacy, but he's into NFTs, crypto, blockchain management, as to how all this is going to play a part and how we
I need to
distribute
know
this.
more about that.
Yes, well, this is the subject matter expert on where.
How far is Rocky Point from Durham, Raleigh? That area?
It's about 3 hours, 2 maybe.
Oh.
I've been to Rocky Mount a couple of times.
I go to mass sometimes at Duke University. So
My son is there right now.
Right at an hour and a half.
My son is
Wow.
there.
Okay, well, the way I drive, it could take forever.
Well, guys, thank you again for taking time. And again, we're going to put together like a one sheet. I've heard about the journal. I've heard about, things that were intersectional, busting all the mythology and doing something that we can, again, present for Black History Month is what I'm presenting. I have other partners that weren't on this call that are trying to put together something at the end of Black History Month that we can publish and distribute to the masses. So that's what we're looking to do.
You and I are due for a follow-up phone call, but I do have to get back to work. Guys, I appreciate y'all. Forgive us. I think that the general said he was wasting his time. This brother.
We're not in the chat.
Brother, we're gonna have to come to Jesus. But anyway, I hope we didn't waste your time, and I hope that everybody felt that this was a useful opportunity for us to introduce ourselves to each other. It's just a first step.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody. Nice to meet everybody.
Okay,
Take
now.
care. Good
Thank
meeting you all
you.
as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
bro, General, you a mess.
It's a line.
Dr. J, you know what? I'm telling you, I'm a Scotch drinker, so we'll have one finger together.
I don't do scotch, but I do Courvoisier.
I got that too. I can make that happen.
All right, we'll work it out.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks,
like I
guys.
said,
And thank you for your service and everything else, just because. My military friends would be delighted to know that I was talking to a general, because I usually diss y'all. As you know, if you read anything I've written.
No, but that's okay. As a matter of fact, in truth, I really appreciate that. I had after the first few days of the Gulf War, I was barnstorming for the Army to talk about the war, and they gave me no script. I was allowed to be as honest as I could about it. I met President Biden, then Senator Biden, on the ground, and I had my conversation with him as well. And I tell people I say the same things that I'm telling you. If you met me on the street, sometimes I might withhold something, but I will never lie to you, no matter where it is. And so my comments with a person that's opposing a lot of our views, the militarism of a nation, I got it. I understand those things and its impacts. You know, Dr. King argued in 1968 that one of the greatest concerns he had was the militarism of the United States. And I understood his perspective. And, you know, when we get a chance, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the myths of what transpired, especially in the early 60s and no, the mid 60s, when all of a sudden the world started to turn on the Vietnam War and its impacts on the African American. So
Okay, I look forward to that conversation, my brother.
She's got to leave, General Brace. She's got to get to another
He's
meeting.
gonna give me everybody's info, and he's gonna give all y'all my info. We should have a conversation.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Last
whatever,
words.
whatever you
guys.
want, whatever you want, I still have funny hours.
There you
Okay,
go. All right, thank you
you're a
guys.
mess, but you are a mess.